A World Cup team is threatening to abandon a match in the middle of play. Not after the final whistle, not at halftime, not because of violence on the pitch. Not because of a referee decision, because of a flag. And the deeper you look into this story, the harder it becomes to believe that anyone involved thought this would end peacefully. Today, Iran faces New Zealand at SoFi Stadium in Los Angeles. On the surface, it looks like another World Cup match. 90 minutes, 3 points. Another step in a tournament that FIFA promised would unite the world. But hanging over the entire event is an ultimatum. If the pre-revolutionary Iranian flag appears inside the stadium, Iran says the team could stop playing and walk off the field immediately. No negotiation, no delay, no waiting until the match ends. And that threat has created one of the strangest collisions the World Cup has ever seen. Iran says the flag cannot appear. Millions of Iranian exiles say they have every right to display it. FIFA tried to ban it. American law may say FIFA cannot. That is the crisis. And every layer underneath it somehow makes the situation worse. Let us look at the exact words because details matter. Iran's sports minister publicly addressed the issue and made the position unmistakably clear. He stated that if the prohibited flag appears, the team manager would be responsible for stopping the match until the issue was fully resolved. Think about what that means. This was not vague language. This was not diplomatic language. This was not a warning that something might happen. It was a public declaration that a World Cup match could be interrupted because of what spectators are holding in the stands. The wording matters because it removes one comforting possibility. The possibility that this is all a bluff. If officials are making statements that specific on the record in public, then they want everyone watching to know they are serious. Which raises an obvious question. How did a football match get anywhere near this point? To understand today, you have to look at what happened earlier this year. And that is where the story stops looking like a sports controversy and starts looking like something much larger. Just months ago, military conflict between the United States, Israel, and Iran dramatically changed the political landscape surrounding the tournament. Deaths mounted, tensions exploded, diplomatic relationships collapsed. For a period of time, participation itself became uncertain. Then came another extraordinary development. Iranian officials suggested the country would boycott the World Cup entirely. No team, no matches, no participation. The reasoning was simple. They argued that safety concerns made involvement impossible. At that point, many people assumed the story was over. No Iran, no controversy, problem solved, except it wasn't, because only weeks later, the position changed. Instead of a complete absence from the tournament, preparations resumed. Training arrangements were adjusted. Travel plans were reworked. Compromises were made. Suddenly, a team that seemed destined to miss the World Cup entirely was preparing to compete. And that creates one of the strangest ironies in this entire story. A government that appeared willing to skip the tournament altogether is now threatening to walk away from a match because of a symbol in the crowd. The contrast is impossible to ignore. And that symbol sits at the center of everything. At first glance, this might seem ridiculous. A flag is a flag, a piece of cloth, a design, some colors, but that interpretation disappears the moment you understand what this particular flag represents. There are effectively two competing visions of Iran. One is represented by the current state flag associated with the Islamic Republic. The other is represented by the older Lion and Sun flag used before the 1979 revolution. For supporters of the current government, the older flag represents a political past that has been rejected. For many members of the Iranian diaspora, it represents the Iran they lost, the Iran they left, the Iran they remember. And suddenly, the argument is no longer about a sporting event. It becomes an argument about identity, memory, history, legitimacy, and belonging. That is why emotions are so intense, because both sides are looking at the same object and seeing completely different things. For one side, it is unacceptable. For the other, it is essential. And the location of this match makes the conflict almost impossible to contain, because this game is not taking place just anywhere. It is taking place in Los Angeles, a city with one of the largest Iranian communities outside Iran itself, sometimes called Tehrangeles, a place where generations of exiles built lives after leaving their homeland, a place where the old flag remains highly visible, a place where many people have no intention of hiding it. That matters because FIFA appears appears to have created a situation that may be impossible to control. The organization reportedly attempted to restrict displays of the disputed flag. The goal was obvious: prevent confrontation, avoid a diplomatic crisis, keep the match alive. But that solution immediately created a new problem, because this is not a World Cup match being played in a country with strict controls on political expression. This is the United States, and that changes everything. Almost overnight, the controversy shifted from football into constitutional territory. Legal organizations began challenging the restrictions. Questions emerged. Can a private sports organization actually prohibit a political symbol in an American stadium? Can spectators be forced to surrender rights that would otherwise be protected? Who ultimately decides? FIFA, local authorities, the courts? The answer remains unclear, and uncertainty is exactly what makes this so dangerous, because nobody knows what enforcement actually looks like. Nobody knows where the legal boundaries are. Nobody knows what happens if thousands of people decide to test those boundaries at the same time. That uncertainty has produced an atmosphere where everyone seems to be preparing for a different outcome. Iran is preparing for a possible walk-off. Supporters are preparing for protests. Lawyers are preparing for challenges. FIFA is preparing for damage control. And the match has not even started. The most remarkable part is that every attempt to reduce tension appears to create even more tension. Consider the trap. If FIFA aggressively enforces the restrictions, critics will argue it is helping silence political expression on American soil. If FIFA refuses to enforce them, Iran may conclude that promises were broken. And then comes the walk-off threat. Do one thing and face outrage. Do the opposite and risk a global scandal. There is no comfortable option. There is no easy escape. And the closer kickoff gets, the more obvious that becomes. Some defenders of FIFA make an important argument. They say the organization is simply trying to keep politics out of football. On paper, that sounds reasonable. Many fans would agree. The World Cup should be about football, not geopolitics, not ideological battles, not decades-old political disputes. That is probably the strongest argument available. The problem is that reality keeps getting in the way, because politics is already here. The visa controversies brought politics into the tournament. The military conflict brought politics into the tournament. The boycott discussions brought politics into the tournament. The flag dispute brought politics into the tournament. At a certain point, claiming politics should stay out of football becomes difficult when football is already sitting directly in the middle of politics. And then another twist arrived. Reports emerged that diplomatic progress was being made elsewhere. Talks, negotiations, potential agreements, possible breakthroughs. For a moment, it looked like the broader tensions surrounding the tournament might finally ease. But does that solve the problem inside SoFi Stadium? No, because the conflict inside the stadium is different. It is not primarily a dispute between governments. It is a dispute between a government and people who left. A dispute between official power and personal identity. A dispute that has been building for decades. You cannot erase that with a press conference. You cannot erase it with a ceasefire. You cannot erase it with a diplomatic statement. The emotions arrive with the fans. They enter the stadium, they sit in the seats, and they remain there regardless of what politicians agree to elsewhere. Which leads to perhaps the most uncomfortable part of the entire story. The players, because they are trapped in the middle. They did not create the conflict. They did not create the symbolism. They did not create the legal disputes. Yet they are the ones standing on the field if the moment arrives. Imagine preparing for years to play in a World Cup. Imagine surviving political turmoil, uncertainty, travel complications, and endless scrutiny. Imagine finally stepping onto the pitch and then finding yourself in a situation where the biggest question is not how you will play. It is whether you will be ordered to stop playing. That possibility hangs over everything. Every pass, every tackle, every minute. And if a walk-off actually happens, the consequences become enormous. The sporting consequences are obvious. A forfeiture, a result decided by procedure instead of football, a match remembered for controversy rather than competition. But the reputational consequences could be even bigger, because the image would travel instantly around the world. Players leaving the field, fans reacting, officials scrambling, broadcasters stunned, a World Cup overshadowed by a symbol in the stands. And once that image exists, nobody controls the narrative anymore. Not FIFA, not governments, not federations, nobody. Which is why this story has become so much larger than one match. It is no longer really about Iran versus New Zealand. It is about what happens when a global sports organization promises inclusivity while trying to manage political realities that cannot be managed. It is about what happens when legal systems collide with sporting regulations. It is about what happens when identity refuses to stay outside inside the stadium, and perhaps most importantly, it is about what fear reveals. Because there is one question that continues to linger over this entire controversy. If a simple flag truly has no power, why is everyone so worried about it? Why ban it? Why challenge the ban? Why threaten to walk off because of it? Why build an entire international crisis around it? That question remains unanswered, but it may also contain the deepest truth in this story, because sometimes the thing institutions fear most is not a weapon, not an opponent, not even a government. Sometimes it is a symbol that refuses to disappear, a symbol carried by people who refuse to forget. And if a World Cup match is genuinely at risk of collapsing because spectators might display that symbol, then regardless of what happens over 90 minutes, one reality becomes impossible to ignore. The argument was never really about football, it just finally arrived on a football pitch.